or two and just watch at their leisure. So yeah, welcome. We're excited to have another Walker Civic Symposium, and we're very excited to have our newly elected Representative Blake Moore from Utah's 1st District that represents, this area, Ogden, to another Walker Civic Symposium. My name is Devin Weiser. I'm the Executive Director of the Walker Institute. Along with me, we have Leah Murray, who is our Academic Director and is smiling and will wave. and probably our most important team member, Becky Stromberg, is also with us. So yeah, it's an honor to have you, Representative Moore. Thank you.
You can strike probably. I know, Becky, you can strike the word probably from that.
Thank you.
I just didn't want to tick off Leah, but you're right. No, but Representative Moore, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us. We're very much looking forward to it. I'm going to start out by just kind of giving a brief bio for you, just so everyone is on the same page, and then I'll turn the time over to you to give remarks about sort of your priorities and your agenda for your term in Congress, and then we will take questions from people that are participating, and we have questions that have been pre-prepared as well in case people are a little bit quiet. So yeah, just to start, Congressman Blake Moore, he is a native of Ogden, Utah. He graduated from the University of Utah after serving a mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in South Korea. He earned a master's in public policy and administration at Northwestern, and he's worked for small businesses and the foreign services and the foreign service experiences that guide his work on domestic and foreign policy. Before moving to Singapore in 2010, Blake married Jane Boyer, his amazing wife, who encourages him to take risks and pursue big things, and I think was maybe a factor in getting you to run for Congress, right? Hopefully she encouraged that. The couple spent time in Southeast Asia and Washington, D.C. with the federal government before moving back to Utah to take a position with the Cicero Group, a Utah-based consulting firm. At Cicero, Congressman Moore led projects and served clients throughout Utah and the nation. He has expertise in education, financial services, public policy, healthcare, transportation, supply chain, and waste industries. And this background will inform his customer service and problem solver approach in Washington, D.C., as he identifies ways to help the federal government work more like Utah, which I think we can all agree would be a great thing. Congressman Moore and his wife have 3 awesome and active boys who keep them on their toes, Max, George, and Winston. And I'm told that even after being sworn in as a member of Congress, your favorite and most prized title is Little League Coach, which I think is awesome. So yeah, a huge and hearty welcome from the Walker Institute at Weber State University. And we'll turn the time over to you, Congressman, to sort of lay out what you'd like to say for a few minutes.
Awesome. Thank you, Devin. It is really great to see you in this role too. I think you're doing an exceptional job. I think it's neat to come from where you just came from back on Capitol Hill. And I think you bring a unique perspective that folks can appreciate. Sincerely, thanks for anybody. You said said 40 or so people had signed up for this. Thanks for anybody for willing to come and listen to me. I signed up for this, so your willingness to come and spend an hour is appreciated. I hope to do this in person again. We'll plan it again. We can do it in person. And you can ask the hard-hitting questions then as well. And but sincerely, as I just scan and see a few names, like I joked about Becky Stromberg earlier, but during the campaign, just the chance to sit down and talk to Becky and Bob Hunter, when I was up on campus, those moments are actually some of the most important moments of building confidence. And then for you need a lot of it, right? I've never run for office before. And you need that encouragement. You need that perspective from folks. And, I see Julie Snowball as well, like having me on with the Rotary Club and, an old neighbor that was just, she knows me. She's willing to, show up and be at things. They're confidence builders. And that's a message that I would actually start with was, engage the community, engage your classmates. I don't know the exact audience I'm speaking to. I'm hoping most of them are students and that they'll be able to have access to this, but, engage what you are involved in, and those relationships will be what propel you to do unique and important things, right? I view Congress as a very unique and important thing to do. I hope to be able to make an impact for my time that I will be there. And, doing this type of stuff, interacting with students that are in this space, like what you're doing matters. The things you're studying matter. You can take what you're learning and translate that into a potential career or a civic engagement, whether it be volunteer service, nonprofit, or a career. Like, don't go through the motions on whatever you're doing. Take these experiences, take the access to really, really important, or not so important, but knowledgeable folks, and apply that. Yesterday was Dan Jones Day in Utah, and I put out a quick post about it. His relationship matters to me. I had his political science class. That instilled a bit of a bug. It's not why I ultimately ran for Congress. Thousands of other data points enter into that, but it's a data point. And then I actually got to work with him for 7 years and even run some of his polling efforts as it went when he passed. And those things matter. And so that's my big encouragement. If you hear nothing else I say today, take the opportunity, don't go through the motions, and the things that you're learning can be leveraged for something more productive going forward. Devin did a great job highlighting sort of the bio. I'll highlight two specific things. I've had an opportunity to work within the federal government before, and I've also had a chance to work in the private sector. Those two things are incredibly important. As I go through my committee work right now, and we're going to be getting a DoD budget here soon for the Armed Services Committee, like having lived and experienced that is something that I knew, even though I was never an elected official, I knew that I had a unique background and a perspective to go back to Washington and serve Utah and serve the 1st District. The second thing was my consulting experience. And I had to over-explain this to lots of people. But I joke when Devin reads out, or when anybody reads that bio and they say trash industry and transportation and healthcare and education and nonprofit and social impact work, I'm like, man, that sounds like a jack of all trades, master of none. And I'm serious. There's an element to that. And it has served me really well in Congress as I interact with industry. I was really excited to be endorsed before the election by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. And I'd never taken a vote. I'd never been I had a record at all. But what they saw from that experience was, okay, so he's interacted with industry a lot. And I have to go into these meetings, and we're going to talk energy, and we're going to talk environment. We're going to talk so many different things. It's actually been something that's really, really been very helpful. And I like to highlight those two things with respect to my background. The other part, I'll talk about 3 quick things. A little slogan that we have in our office, just the message that I tried to create on the campaign trail that I was never disparaged for, productivity over partisanship. And then I try to communicate as much as possible addressing our debt crisis. And I'll just quickly highlight. But the slogan that we use in our office, we call it API. It's aspirational, pro-growth, and inclusive. And that's the kind of conservative principles that our team wants to promote. To quickly highlight them, when you talk aspirational, the 1st District was the Transcontinental Railroad. We helped put a man on the moon. We're involved in the space rover. You go up to Logan into Space Dynamics Lab, or the industries that are involved. Like, we think big, right? And Utah hits above its weight in general. But there are specific things with the 1st District that are really, really highlight there. We have to always be thinking big. We have to be aspirational on what we want to accomplish. Being pro-growth is particular to Utah as such a fast-growing state. Interacting with our cities and counties, our transportation organizations, and being thoughtful about how we manage growth and making sure to fuel that and do that in a way that's environmentally responsible. There's so much involved in that. And so a lot of the framework and decisions that we're using is about this, maintaining this pro-growth, right? And the last piece about inclusiveness, we need to help the next generation escape the divisive rhetoric and work to solve problems, right? You see it constantly. I'm in the middle of a lot of it, and it's not good for our country to constantly be engaging in such divisive rhetoric. And I've had a quarter's worth in the 1st quarter. I've had a quarter's worth of of a lot of things being thrown at you. And I think the thing I'm most proud of is our team has been able to find a productive lane, building relationships with folks that, maybe they haven't paid off yet. Maybe I haven't accomplished any big legislative victory, but we've been able to get a lot of legislative pieces put in place. And right now I'm obviously in the minority in both, and that's not something that I'm leaning out. What we're doing is we're setting the foundation to have these relationships so we can build on this. It's been the moment of like, okay, it's been a tough quarter, but we can come out of it and say we've built this productive lane has been a definite highlight. And that just leads right into the piece about productivity over partisanship. I haven't had to sacrifice an ounce of my core conservative principles, but when transportation comes up, we can work together. Right? There are issues that Republicans and Democrats they're going to disagree on. We're going to go back and forth on these. We have got to find a way to come together better. I just signed on to a bipartisan letter about the infrastructure package that's coming down the pike here soon, and encouraging the administration to take a more bipartisan approach to this. We'll see how it all plays out, but we have to have that. I'm joining the type of groups that are going to be helpful in doing this and promoting this. From the Problem Solvers Caucus to 30 for 30 or the Millennial Debt Foundation, which will lead me into my next key topic. Just finding those ways, those mechanisms that you can interact and find common ground. We need more of that in Washington, and hopefully I can be part of the solution over time and not more of the problem. And I'm sincerely hopeful for that. And I won't belabor this last point, but addressing the debt crisis is something I'm passionate about. When I was running, two of the big things that came up was Hill Air Force Base and our massive debt and our deficit woes. I want to be a part of a reversal of debt culture. And so I'm trying to, again, set our team up to be successful in building these types of bipartisan groups so we can actually accomplish what was done, which seems like a million years ago, but it was within all of our lifetimes for the most part. I guess I'm talking to some students, but in 1997, when we balanced the budget, that was a big win. And in my opinion, I call it Cooperstown or the Hall of Fame of politics, when they came together in a bipartisan way and put the country back on track fiscally. And that's something that I want to be able to be a part of. And so I'm trying to lay the groundwork for that as well. So I'll pause there, and just a quick highlight of our two committee assignments: natural resources and armed services. Armed services, we have a big defense community in Utah. Primarily Hill Air Force Base is obviously the biggest installation and a key focus of our team. And natural resources encompasses an enormous amount of swath of our state. We are at a unique disadvantage in a lot of ways, but also a very big positive for us with public lands. It cuts both ways. It needs to have balance. With Utah having such a high percentage of public lands, it's something that a lot of states don't even understand. And a lot of members from other states are it's a concept that's missed on a lot of folks. And I hope to use my time in natural resources to be able to promote good policies that are good for our economy and our environment. Member of our team stated it best when she said the solutions to these are not in one interest group or one industry. It's an all-encompassing need to find balance, and we're trying to promote that as much as possible. So I'll pause there, Devin. I hope that wasn't too long. I tried to get through a lot there, and would love to address some of the questions that folks may have.
No, that was perfect. Thanks so much, Blake, or Congressman Moore, sorry. So yeah, just a quick reminder to everyone, if you want to put your questions in the chat, I can read them off to Congressman Moore. In the meantime, we'll start with a hard-hitting question from our academic director, Leah Murray. She wants to know what your favorite baseball team is.
So, I'll make it political real quick. I'm trying to be somebody that's balanced and call out things as I see that, whether it's going to lean right, lean left, and just where you see a double standard. The baseball thing is the top of my mind right now with the All-Star piece. Like it's frustrating to see, so much of, I believe that, large corporations are, getting involved and weighing in on something. But if you look at the actual Georgia law, like those are reasonable laws. And I've heard that commented by several, even left-leaning sort of media outlets. So baseball is a hot topic right now. So thanks for starting out, but you didn't expect it to be hard hitting. But we as a society, as folks, I will fight for people's freedom of speech, right? That's the first thing on the list. But we have to be more thoughtful and balanced in our approach and in hearing people's other people's perspective. And we cannot just pile on to what sometimes could be perceived as a convenient narrative. So as you bring up baseball over the weekend, I was frustrated to see that the All-Star decision was made. That will hurt a lot of small businesses that were planning on that. We'll see how that all plays out, but that's initially my initial thought on that. But I am a Mets fan, and I am not afraid to admit it. I own it. It's not great. It's horrible. I can see Jim shaking his head. I get it totally. And I'm unapologetically a Mets fan. I was 7 years old, and I had a Darryl Strawberry rookie card. I randomly got it back when you used to get that stale baseball gum, or that gum, and I maintained it for. Even worse, I was a Brian Bosworth fan because I was 7 and then became a Seahawk. So these things stuck with me for my whole life, unfortunately. But yeah, I'm a Mets fan.
All right, then no, that was a good answer, even though some people disagree. That's okay. First comment from Jim, as you just gave him a shout out. He's complimenting you and your staff for always taking his calls and actively listening. Talking about how it's been a wonderful experience to contact your office. So that's a compliment to you and to the team you've put together.
Definitely to the team.
Yeah. The next question that has come in is from Scott Moore. He says, are you still planning on moving forward with getting rid of daylight savings time? He's a lifestyle medicine physician and would love to help out. What are your thoughts on that?
I don't know why it doesn't get more traction. Everybody on that day tweets about it. Yep. And you never see much going on. From my understanding, I would argue that daylight, so the D part of it, so what we're in currently, is what you could exist throughout the time. That would be my argument. Now, it's our responsibility not to do the popular thing, right? And this would keep it darker for kids going to school throughout the school year during the winter months. And you have bus stops, you have safety issues. You have to look at all sides of it. There was a reason for it to go into effect. It is frustrating as a parent, especially with 3 young boys, for those few days where it is, loss of sleep and everything. But if there can be enough traction, it's not what I went back to Congress for, but I do see value in daylight savings time being sort of just maintained. Other countries have done it. Arizona exists with it. They're probably a little bit of a different daylight issue down in the southern part. But can we look at data and see, has it affected people's mood? Does it have an effect on mental health? We've got to be considerate of that type of stuff. And I don't know the full range of considerations. Those are just what are at the top of my head. But I do think it warrants, because everybody wants to talk about it, and it warrants at least further push. So if there's something in data you want to provide, by all means, send it to the office.
Yeah, I know Paul in your DC office gets pretty passionate about that topic. So I'm sure he'll be happy that question was brought up early. Kim Smith is asking a great question, especially considering you've lived in Southeast Asia. So you kind of have this hands-on, firsthand knowledge of the situation. What are your thoughts on the US-China relationship?
Yeah, I just gave a much more long form answer to this on the US Chamber event a few weeks ago. The point that I like to highlight to folks, when in our history as a nation has our biggest adversary, and I view China as our potential biggest adversary, both militarily and economically, when has our biggest adversary, when have we had such tight economic integration with a potential huge superpower rival? So the Cold War, like Russia didn't own our debt, right? There was interaction, but there wasn't an enormous amount of US manufacturing in Russia during the Cold War. Germany, Japan, like these were real threats to our way of life and military threats. And we didn't have, much integration with these places. I would almost go back to obviously the Civil War, right? And the Revolutionary War, where there was this really tight immigration. This is a tough issue to deal with, and it can't be driven by rhetoric. My big thing that I think I've had a resounding commitment to this topic or this idea, even since the campaign, was find options. We need more options. We need to explore Southeast Asia, Vietnam in particular. India we have a good solid relationship with India. To some degree, even our military and our intelligence, there's a good relationship there. Let's promote that. Let's find manufacturing capabilities. We need to bring some of our manufacturing back to the U.S. and this post-COVID time should give us an opportunity for that. You hear oftentimes said a renaissance in manufacturing in the U.S. Could we bring some of it more near shore, even to like Puerto Rico and things like that? I'm very open to that idea, obviously, but finding other options. We'll do our best to bring China to the table. There is human rights violations constantly, and if we want to exert control or moral authority, if you will, we need to be able to do it where we aren't so pressured by the debt that we owe to China, and all of our U.S. companies that are so ingrained there. Because if we just simply wipe it clean and say we're done and shut down borders and create a big problem, like a lot of our companies lose their equities that are going to be there. So that's the resounding piece that I always try to convey. I think that's on par with Utah World Trade Center. They are the leaders in this space, in my opinion, on thought and how we do this. We have to be thoughtful about how this affects us economically. But again, it goes back to debt. We are limited in what we can do by being hamstrung so much by our debt. And I'll kind of end it there because it's a difficult quagmire to understand. But my perspective from Southeast Asia, great relationships with those countries. And you know what? We were at war with Vietnam, and now we have a great relationship with Vietnam, a better relationship. Still, obviously, could be better. But finding options down there, protecting the South China Sea, that will be one of the biggest pieces as far as militarily, and finding ways to modernize our military and our approach. That's what I love about my subcommittee assignment on cyber. It's going to be a key thing in the future because cyber will affect everything from financial services to the firewalls within our military. We have to be prepared for that threat.
Thank you. Great answer. We'll have to find that long form answer you gave to the chamber at some point. That would be fascinating just to hear, I'm sure. The next question is about healthcare, and it comes from Stephanie Fuller. She says, healthcare has a long and storied history. What can you do to cost effectively and fairly provide basic healthcare for more of us? So what are your thoughts on the healthcare situation?
The short-term type of stuff is price transparency. That's a key one. Price transparency, so we have more power as consumers, then that will drive prices down overall. I don't know what an x-ray costs. I have no idea. I don't know anything like this. I can go to a number of different, and then on the premium side, on the insurance premium side, I know exactly what I'm getting into when I talk Progressive and Geico. I can compare it all, and it's very, very clear. Now, we've gotten to some bit of that. We need to be able to promote as much consumer-driven power that works so well in other industries to healthcare, because it's not. I'm somebody that, I understand why it's such a tough issue. The debate, whether it's a right or not, it's a valid debate, and that's where it becomes such a key piece. But we have to look at what's going on. We are continually going into more and more debt. This is a key big piece of it, right? Entitlement spending, the need for entitlement reform is clear, right? You can look at that on the Social Security side. You can look at that on healthcare. These are huge costs. One thing that I get really frustrated with as well, and I don't want to just talk about problems, but with our Medicaid system, the gap in Medicaid is tough. It disincentivizes people from working. And so there are a lot of community health centers, and I was really encouraged in the campaign. I got to interact with community health centers. There's a centralized version of it here in Utah, and then they have centers all over the state. And they talk about a sliding scale that they have with respect to their payment. Right now, our Medicaid system, it's like, okay, if you make this much or less, you get access to Medicaid. If you make this much or more, you don't get access to it, and then you have to go get your own health. But there's a gap there that basically disincentivizes people from getting out of that poverty situation, right? And if they make $10,000 more, they're going to be paying more, and they're going to be making less overall because they can't do that Medicaid gap. So there's ways to address that and fix that. But I think the immediate next steps that we should all be able to agree on, with respect to at the congressional level, is finding ways for increased, price transparency and having more control with the consumer. I don't have all the answers to this yet. I'm not on a committee that's related to this, but I would argue though that if you put this on the list, this is top 3 for people, right? And it is an incredibly important thing, and we have to have in our party, the Republican Party has to be not just against Medicare for all. Like, we have to be putting forth these common sense solutions. And let me channel. Devin's gonna laugh, but let me channel the Rob Bishop, here, and Representative Bishop. You allow for states to do this work, you will find options. I'm confident that our legislature, our governor, like, you give them the tools to be able to create solutions, we can find ways for other states to mimic what we do well, right? And so this concept of federalism is slowly going away and away and away, and we need to find a way in some areas to pull that back. I think we've at least done that with Every Student Succeeds in education. We almost sort of stopped the centralized hemorrhaging that was going on, and moved it into a more decentralized situation. Now, it's still got strings attached, and I'm not saying ESSA is perfect, but from what I understand from school superintendents across the state, it's a move in the right direction. Still some areas that need to be addressed, but if we allow our states to be able to operate when these sort of incubators of innovation, then we can do that. And I think that healthcare should be the proving ground for that. I don't think we're there right now. It's not going to be something that's addressed in this administration, at least for the next couple of years. But those types of solutions, I'm hopeful for.
Thanks so much. The next question comes to us from Kim Dixon. She says, what are your most important issues as our representative? And that sort of ties in with something that other people have asked me before. What policy areas are you most interested personally?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm a representative, so I get asked the question personally a lot. It matters because we all have to, push our own, agenda, and we all have our passions. But I'm a representative. I actually ask people to call me representative more than I ask them to call me Blake. Let's be honest. But I say representative over congressman because there's a unique nature to these districts, right? And the representative feel of I'm on natural resources and armed services. Those are the 2 areas that I will have at least the most say, especially as a member of the minority party right now. And those are issues that are important, right? Finding balance in our public lands and being able to address, like, okay, can we convince folks that grazing is not the worst thing in the world, that there is good multi-use that's done. We do need energy. American produced energy is better done than foreign produced energy with respect to environmental standards. We have to still be able to embrace this in a balanced way. That's something that, that given my role on that committee, I want to be involved in. And then with armed services, Hill Air Force Base is a top priority. There's the GBSD program, there's the F-35 program. Those are really, really important. Those are important to our national defense. They're important to Northern Utah, specifically with jobs, and we've made that a strong priority. And then the next thing, and I'll add this, is a little more personal, I guess, because of my experience on the campaign, but I've also, I was surprised to hear how many constituents wanted us to address immigration reasonably, right? And figure this out. There are so many companies that are short on labor, that we need to, fix our H-2A, H-2B, and J-1 visa issues. And I assume, Devin, you've dealt with this in your time in Congress. It's something that people are really passionate about. Landscaping companies, construction companies, agriculture. Like, we want to embrace immigration to be able to get the workforce that we need. And finding simple, streamlined solutions on doing this. Our team is knocking down doors and trying to figure out the best angles to help with this. But it was a resounding message we heard from folks during the campaign on helping us get the talent we need, doing it in a secure way. This is not anything, we need to strengthen our border. That what's going on our border right now needs to be addressed, needs to be fixed. This is the number of folks that are coming. It's a real problem. And we need to be able to strengthen our border and find reasonable solutions That has to be done in a bipartisan way. And I'm hopefully, again, I'll say it, on the front end of this, I hope to be, in my time, be a part of the solution, not the problem. But those are the things that kind of bubble up in the top of my head with respect to issues.
That's great. Thanks so much. That actually is a perfect segue into Stephanie Fuller's question. She says, I just returned from a trip to Tucson, Arizona. How can we balance our natural empathy for the misfortune of other people while still protecting our borders and national interests?
So we have to be able to strengthen the border. And that might mean physical border in some areas. And I sat behind an individual from the Space Dynamics Lab on a flight who was actually flying back to go brief the Homeland Security team on some new technologies that were going to potentially be used and some of the drone work that can be done. There's not a one size fits all to the border. We have to be able to address it, agree as a nation that it's important, and you cannot take a reasonable, practical approach at the millions of people that are here that want to be here for the right reasons, that are working, and we want to be collecting taxes on this, and we want them to be engaged and not in hiding. I said this on a town hall a few weeks ago, and I'll say it again. I was hopeful, and I even read a Wall Street Journal piece on this that was hopeful that we could come together, with Biden-led administration and a Congress that is very, very narrow, right? This is narrow margins as there's ever been, and come up with a simple solution for DACA, right? And taking the DACA solution from what Obama era was, which is a finite number of people, and find a solution there. Let's have a win. Anytime you're trying to, this is going to go back to management consulting days. So if anybody out there, any students that are interested in management consulting, this is definitely an area to be focused on. It's change management. When you want to make a big change in an organization, and I would argue that the U.S. government is a large organization, Congress is also a large organization and a big bureaucracy and tough to move. Whenever you want to make a change, you want to celebrate some quick wins. And that was the message that I kind of gave on when asked about DACA a little while ago, is we should be able to come together with some reasonable approaches. We do have to strengthen the border and then look at certain ways to promote folks that want to be here for the right reasons, but not give them priority for those that are in the pipeline now for legal immigration. But do it in a way that's productive. Streamline that H2A, H2B process so we can get workers here. And like dairy, for example, it doesn't work for them right now. This system doesn't work for them because it's cut up in a time frame. Dairy's a year-end deal. A lot of agricultural is cyclical, and they're not able to make it work. So address it so it works for certain industries. Have industry get weighed in and actually maybe provide more sponsorship. Fix the widely disseminate the process. I'm blanking on the name of it, but that's the verification process. Like let's get people here that want to be here, want to work, and find the solutions. It's a tough thing to deal with, but if we can't determine this is the same thing I'll say with the debt. We have to determine a framework that will work. We first determine what the framework is. Is it secure and strengthen the border? Then we can go about finding a solution for those that are here and those that are trying to immigrate here for the right reasons. Like, you can't really do much until you do that, but we have to, as a country and as a Congress, decide, okay, let's agree to that and then go. I bring up the debt because I think there's a framework for the debt. I think you grow the economy. I think you address entitlement reform and mandatory spending, which grows at an exponentially really high rate. Then you take a look at your discretionary spending and find areas that you can improve on. And that would, that includes across the board, a lot of the discretionary spending we do. And then fourth, if we're not happy with where we've reduced our debt to GDP ratio, then you look at tax increases. You don't keep spending and do tax increases at the same time. The tax increases will help grow the economy. That will provide more revenue. Address reform. This is how they did it in '97 under a Democrat president, and Bill Clinton and Leon Panetta. He was the head of the budget committee for his staff. And then Newt Gingrich and John Kasich were two key players on the legislative side. That's how they went about doing it. And I think that's how we would have to do it again. Now, the interest, sorry to get talking debt. I tend to do that, so I apologize. But the interest is a big problem. And that will be something that we have to reckon with that we didn't have to deal with as much in '97. That's why I talk about we need to get our debt to GDP ratio much lower, and then we see where we're at. So I'll pause there. Sorry if I ramble a little bit.
No, that was great. I mean, both are very crucial issues. We're going to sort of switch topics pretty big time for this question from Luke Jenkins. He says, do you support statehood for DC, for Puerto Rico? Please explain your answers. I don't know if have you had the chance to meet Jennifer Gonzalez Colon from Puerto Rico? She's the resident commissioner. You should meet her. She's great.
Okay, I will look to that. And if anybody on my team is on the call, let's try to say that. I could spend the rest of the time talking about this issue. I won't, I promise, but I will explain. One, Democrats want DC statehood because it gives them 2 more senators. Republicans don't want DC statehood because it gives them 2 more, because it gives Democrats 2 states. Let's recognize that. Let's be honest with ourselves. And then let's find a solution. All right. Okay. So every time that we've kind of added a state, there's always been a balance to it. Right. And this will go back to the free state, slave state type of thing. There's been a right and a left state kind of brought into the union at the same time. I firmly believe we need to maintain that balance here. Adding DC as a state on its own will not enable that. And I don't know the makeup of Puerto Rico. So let me just handle DC first. And then we can touch on Puerto Rico. I'm not as well versed on Puerto Rico stuff. And I'm kind of one of those folks that hopefully you learn to like about me, that if I'm not going to talk my way through something. If I'm not very well versed, I'll tell you that, and I'll go get better informed on it. I think people have appreciated that in my time. I did it on the campaign. And I was really worried about saying, like, I actually don't know the answer to that. And they're like, you know what? That's refreshing to hear. So let me talk DC. The next issue is that we have 500,000 people that are getting taxed and they don't have representation. That's wrong for our country. I think that I don't think that should exist. We need them to be able to say they have representation. So there's one idea floating around. Well, first off, with respect to the first piece, that's why you don't let Republicans and Democrats just make decisions. You go off the Constitution, right? There was an autonomous zone established. If we were going to let just political winds make all of our decisions, it would be a constant back and forth. It's just an absolute mess. And we see too much of that in executive action from both parties, right? We see way too much of that. And it's just, repeal what the other one did, add this, repeal that. Can't get into that mode. So we got to go off the Constitution. The Constitution established an area that Congress should do its business, and it should not be within a state. So there's an interesting idea. Kind of take portions of the federal government, the areas that are being worked. I don't know how you draw these exact boundaries, but you would then roll Maryland down into encompassing a lot of the citizenship from those folks that live in DC. And there's merit to that, right? Protect sort of that autonomous area that the Constitution, has established, and then, change Maryland's boundaries to take that in. Okay, so that's something that I always felt like, I think that's pretty reasonable. Then I had someone else, a constituent. I won't name him here, but he's an Ogden resident and a very thoughtful person, and comes to me with all sorts of policy ideas. I love it. When I get a text from him, I'm like, I got to find a time to take that call. He came up with, he suggested this. So let me throw it out here, and then we'll see if it gets viral and it ever makes it back into the halls of Congress. Some of the original boundaries of DC actually incorporated Arlington and Alexandria on the Virginia side. It's more of a diamond shape, right? So it doesn't just cut off with the Potomac. You could make that diamond shape. You could take DC back to its sort of original size. Maybe I think Alexandria has to sort of be bubbled out a little bit. But you take Arlington and Alexandria, incorporate that into the current DC boundaries, and make a state for Washington, DC. Now, you're saying, Blake, that's just going to make an additional blue state with 2 Democrat senators. But what will it do to Virginia? Virginia becomes a bit more.
Hey, rural. How are you doing?
Virginia becomes a bit more rural, and it has I haven't looked at the data, I haven't run the analysis on this, but from the concept, that would maybe have Virginia be a red state, and you would have more Republican voters in that based off of trends. Now, those trends change over time, which is what's awesome. But when you implement a new thing like this, you should preserve that balance. That way people can agree on it. We can address the fact that folks are getting taxed without representation and go there. So not my idea, fully going to give credit to the individual that presented it to me, but I loved it. And I think there's merit to that. Because if a Democrat will say, no, I don't like that idea, well, then I'm going to say, well, why? Do you care about taxation without representation, or do you care about partisanship? That's the fundamental question that we need to answer. And I would say taxation is the important part, and maintaining that sort of constitutional thing now. But we've added states before. It's not against the Constitution, but doing it in a balanced way is very important. So again, I get a little passionate about it. I think I'm seeing nods, so we might be going down the right path here, but I think it's something to explore.
No, thank you. Those are interesting concepts, and it will be quite the process to see how that all develops, I'm sure.
Well, one other person had suggested, let's just stop taxing them. And so we'll see. I'm like, I think you're going to get a bunch of people moving to DC. They're not going to care if they have a senator. They're not going to get federally taxed. I'll bet you that, home prices would definitely go up if that's the case.
Yeah, that's definitely true. Bob Hunter has chimed in, and he says he's always concerned about providing access to human services help, especially during these COVID times. And he's very supportive of the HELP Act of 2021. And he asked if you're supporting this measure. He didn't give, a number, but so I don't know if you're familiar with that. If not, we can just move on and we can get back to him,
Nope, I'm jotting it
personally.
down. HELP Act, I'm not sure. I don't want to ask anyone on my team to chime in right now. They might not be prepared for it. I have said from my start of my campaign, well, there was no COVID at the start of my campaign. Once it kind of ramped up, I got asked all the time about aid. And I care about targeted aid. I look at Utah's industries right now. The industries that are struggling the most is our urban areas of tourism. Some of our rural areas, some of our national parks and everything they're doing, they've had probably too much. Tourism, those kind of things, they need help, right? They're displaced workers. They need assistance. I support targeted relief. And if this is something that's in line with that, and it's data centered, that we could show how this could be effective, and this isn't going to dissuade people from getting back to work. It's something, those are the principles on which I believe the government can step in. And we saw some of that. We didn't see a lot of, we're not seeing a lot of that right now. And that's what I'm supportive of. This most recent COVID package, they would have said, well, you didn't support it. And I said, I understand that. I would have supported any dollar you could have done for vaccine distribution. Right, and making sure our schools had what they needed to open, so our parents could get back to work, and doing it in a way that's as safe as possible, but like putting the emphasis on those areas that are going to promote that. That's what I mean. I can't get up here and say that I care about the debt, and then have voted for the rescue plan. Like and if that's just not something that I am. So is the HELP Act? Let's look into it. I'll made a note of it, and I'll have my team take a look, and we'll happily. I'll even talk to Devin about it separately, and we'll see where we're at with things like that.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So we actually have a couple members of the media on our forum today. Emily Means has the next question. She's with KUER. She says, what do you think about the legislature ending the statewide mask mandate on April 10th? There seems to be concerns by business owners that frontline workers will be negatively impacted by this policy, meaning it will be more difficult to enforce business mask policies, and not all frontline workers are vaccinated yet. So what are your thoughts on that? I know it's a state issue, but. Yeah,
no, but I don't want to always just, it's too easy as the federal side. It's like, it's a state's issue. I'm going to punt on that particular question. I think Utah's doing an exceptional job at getting their vaccine. I was just at Weber State at the event center. President Mortensen and the team took me on an awesome tour. We're being thoughtful about it. We're doing it. We're seeing numbers decrease. Can I say that, yes, the legislature made this decision. They took in perspective from the governor, and they made a decision, and I'm supportive of that. I'm also supportive for Governor Cox. I believe that he said at government buildings, and government institutions, we're going to extend it a little bit longer. That's leadership too, right? And so Utah has always done this really well. We've done it really well this entire time. We kept our economy open. We pushed the envelope on some things, and we were willing to take a look at the data and pull back and continue to move forward and pull back. And as I was watching us, and I was from the side, I was on the sidelines, and I was watching Governor Herbert and Governor and then Lieutenant Governor Cox, and I was very glad I didn't have to be in their shoes. It's not an easy thing to deal with, right? And I'm completely okay admitting that. I think they balanced pushing and monitoring data, pulling back, pushing, and we're willing to make a mandate. To me, it feels like where we're at with the vaccine, where we're at with our incident and our mortality rates, this April 10th, mid-April, this feels like, let's try it. Let's go, let's monitor things, but this is a good time to go about it. Let's be smart. It's still, you can maintain distance if you're in a particular area, of concern health-wise, take your own precautions. That was always our family's approach. Still have to get out there, still have to work. But my parents, we knew they were at a higher risk level. They clamped down, they locked down, and they're starting to come to Little League games again. That's the important part. So, and I don't ever want my comments to be seen as not sensitive. I've lost dear friends. Coach Russell, I still get emotional thinking about it. Like, that is not me being insensitive to the people that we have lost through this event, but this is a time that we can try this, push it, and see where things go. The introduction of variants is the thing to watch, in my opinion, because we have the vaccine that's showing efficacy, and we need to embrace that.
Cool, thank you. The next question comes from Luke Jenkins, and he says, one issue I had while I was considering who to vote for last fall was that despite all of your ties, you did not then reside in the district you were running to represent. Have you relocated north? If not, are you planning to?
Absolutely. Fair question. I never dodged this one. This is one thing that really got highlighted with me a lot more than maybe some other candidates. It's interesting to reflect. 4 out of 8 congressional candidates in the fall lived outside their district boundaries. That's not an excuse. That's not anything. It's not a constitutional requirement. And again, I go back to the DC thing. Ultimately, when you have a constitution, you make your decisions based off of it. I knew two things when mid-January of last year. I was 39 years old in an amazingly awesome job. I loved it. Someone had suggested, hey, you should consider this. You have a unique background. You could serve Hill Air Force Base really well. And you've got obvious ties to Ogden. You should consider this. And I remember saying, I don't live in the district. And I looked at it and I said, there's 2 things that are going to keep me from doing this. One is that I currently live outside the district. I mapped it out. I looked, I'm like, good heavens, I'm 15 miles from the district. I live more central than anybody else in the race to some degree. I can get to Vernal as easy as I can get to Logan. I can get to Park City, get to Layton. I love that part of it, but I get the question still remains. So I'm not going to over-explain this, but that and a young family, those are the 2 things that kind of gave me pause. Making the decision that we did, I jumped in and made it work. They're redistricting in about 5 months, and I don't know what boundaries are going to look like, right? And so I have to make that decision. When we see what the boundaries look like, that'll be something that we address, and my wife and I will figure it out. I have a young boy with autism. He's in the middle of all of his therapies and school. I've just got lots of things to consider. I've joked oftentimes that, ever since a kid, and I always joke in the debate up at Weber State, I was like, if I ever got posed with the question, I never really did. I'm like, you guys, I learned to rollerblade like about 50 meters from here. I've skinned my knees right there. Like, my whole entire childhood was here. I grew up here. I get this. That bore out when Weber County showed up and voted, and that was one of those moments during the campaign, because this question that I got all the time when I saw that Weber County came up big and supported me in that primary, that meant the world to me. And we will figure it out. The boundaries get redrawn. That's when my wife and I will figure out what exactly we're going to do. And I don't have an exact answer on where exactly I'm going to be. What are we going to do? A lot of those kind of factors. But I'm committed to this. The fact that I'm central gets me to get everywhere, and I'm giving everything I've got. And so that's as much as I'll say right now. And then once they redistrict, I'll address it again.
Great. Thanks so much. The next question comes from one of my favorite people at Weber State University. I shouldn't say that. All these people that are on are my favorite, but Julie Snowball. She says, now that you've been in office a few months, what is surprising to you and what are the little wins you think you can accomplish during your term and how can we help?
I love it. Thanks, Julie. That sounds like a question she would ask.
Mhm.
Being productive and how to do it. I am a bit surprised at this first quarter has been it's been a unique time, but there has been a big, strong push from Democrat leadership just to push a bunch of bills through that were kind of, created in the 116th. Pretty much everything we voted on in the last 6 weeks was just legislation that through a rule that the majority made called the McGovern rule that allowed for legislation to get to the House floor without going through committee, without going through markup. That's not the way this is designed, right? So I think to answer your question, Julie, my biggest surprise is something I learned in my public policy class. It's coming to fruition. It's becoming realized for me. You can just change the rules. Like you can change the rules and that's how we govern. And we do, our party does it too. Like everybody does it. There is an enormous amount of double standard going on back in Washington. But this ability to just kind of, our Congress, the 117th is fundamentally different than the 116th. At some points, we lost an individual named Luke Ledlow. His wife just got elected into that seat. I think it's down, Devin, you actually may know better than me. I think it's 6 total people that make the difference between the majority versus the minority in DC. Maybe it's 8. I can't remember exactly because some seats haven't been filled yet, but they'll likely go to a Democrat, that type of thing. I mean, we have such narrow margins. We have a fundamentally different Congress than they did in the 116th. We should be debating these. We should find ways to pass legislation that will actually have a chance in the Senate. Because what's the point? If we know that the Senate isn't going to likely take up a lot of this, what's the point of passing it? It's a waste of time, right? So go work together in committee, get a more bipartisan approach to all these different bills that are going through. Again, these aren't bills that are, addressing core conservative or progressive, beliefs. These is going to be a transportation bill. These are things that we can find common ground on that we're not. And our, it's you can change the rules kind of to fit something that's needed, and just how much power the majority actually wields. I was hopeful with such narrow margins that we could propose some reasonable legislation that, of course, 10 Democrats, maybe they're in an agriculture heavy area that are going to agree like, yeah, this is good for my district. Well, good. Let's build some legislation that's going to get something. I haven't seen that. I think with losing the Georgia Senate, you're going to see a very opportunistic approach to legislation this first term. And so what I'm trying to do is just create relationships and set ourselves up for success. So we've got the Recreation Not Red Tape Act going in. That's going to have a large bipartisan feel. We've got the Medal of Honor thing that we're introducing, that we've already introduced. That's a monument for Medal of Honor. Those aren't sweeping huge pieces of legislation that CNN's going to cover for weeks on end. No, but they're productive. They're moving forward, and they're helping cement some relationships. So we can make a difference to this as we go forward. So
thanks so much. So one of the huge areas that the Walker Institute is trying to cover is how we can become more unified as a country. We're working on a project called Unify America, just trying to get Democrats and Republicans to talk to each other. From your perspective, now that you've been in DC a few months, what is it like there, and what tips would you have to give to your average student or average citizen to sort of get back to that being the norm, where we can talk about our differences and still be human?
So I don't have a solution for it, but honestly, if you were to take any policy issue, you could take the most contentious policy issue there is. I guarantee you could find 80% agreement on things if you were to build that legislation from that piece of common interest, right? Most contentious, abortion. Okay, let's get real here, right? Abortion. I'll guarantee if you go to a room of 50 Democrats and 50 Republicans, you could all agree we want to avoid unwanted pregnancies, right? You could all agree on education matters. We could all, there's a way to start our policy discussions from a point of common ground and build from there. And you know what? depending on who has the majority and who doesn't, maybe you get to that point of like, oh, here's our breaking point. Here's where we disagree. Where you decide, is this what we want our package to be and actually have a chance in the Senate? Or do we want to put a messaging bill and push this through and put either Democrats or Republicans in tough positions? Because a lot of what gets done back there is to put people in binds where they can go and say, oh, you didn't vote for this. And well, yeah, I wasn't going to go anywhere and I don't believe in these two things, so I didn't support it. And then they want to use that as a bind. So I would say wherever you can, make your policy decisions at a point of common interest. And then embracing these sort of bipartisan working groups. I'll give a quick example of an incredible mentor of mine, somebody that I've really, I've seen him, do really great things. He's been able to be very successful legislatively, whether in the majority or the minority, and it's Representative John Curtis, right? John Curtis is a member of a bipartisan working group called Problem Solvers. I joined it as well. He went down to the floor, introduced an amendment that was to just create a study for thermo energy, right? Where can we find it, right? And this was part of a bigger package that was going on. He just introduced an amendment. Now, there's so much that happens so fast, especially in this first quarter. A lot of members of Congress get a recommendation. It's oftentimes a party line vote, and they go down to the House floor and there's 5 things to vote on and they're voting on it. I was standing next to a Democrat, a friendship that I've made. We have a similar background, and standing next to her, talking to her right when John Curtis's amendment was up, and she goes, "Oh, I'm checking my recommendation here," and she goes, "Okay, yeah." So the Problem Solvers Caucus, they're supportive of this. Yeah, she votes yes. The amendment passes when a lot of other things that day were getting passed on a party line vote, but because there's that mechanism in place to create those conversations and say, "You guys, this is reasonable. This is not crazy. This is something you can support." Like, it worked. And it got it to the point where it was just enough to tip the scale and pass the reasonable amendment. And, huge kudos to John for being able to go about doing that. And I was really impressed. And that's where I saw the value of a group like that. So those are just 2 ideas that are practical, that hopefully we can create that a little bit more.
I love that. Thanks so much. We're just trying to get to a point where we can, respectfully disagree. That I think we can still hold on to our core values, like you mentioned, and communicate with each other like we always have.
One more thing I'll quickly add.
Please.
It's that concept of a framework. Debate the framework. If we went in and debated what the framework was to fixing our debt, it wouldn't be like super contentious. It would be like, okay, well, what data do we have to prove this? And what case studies do we have to go off of what you think the 4 steps are and what we think the 4 steps are? You get to a framework, then you can build a change management approach to go and implement change. So I think that's the other key thing is using frameworks, because those frameworks shouldn't be super partisan, and you can base decisions on those things. I've had to do that on lots of different things. Like, okay, we're going to make this decision, and as long as I can possibly do it, I'm going to keep basing some of my votes off of a process orient or some type of principle than necessarily the content. And you do that, you can get some consistency. I love that you're working on that, though. That's great.
Hey, yeah, absolutely. We have about a minute left. I have one more broad question. So it seems like, we often see what is wrong with America, and that sort of dominates the news cycle. But I want to turn it around. What is your favorite part about America? What do you love most about America?
So, this is something that really hit me a lot during the pandemic, that we value family still. And not every family is the same. I'm not saying we need nuclear families. I'm not saying anything like that. What I'm saying is we value family. We value that network and those relationships that we have. And sometimes they're tough, but when things are tough, that means deep down, it may not feel that way, but you actually care about it immensely. And that's not just an only American value. I've lived abroad, and that's a core piece. But we really saw that come through in leaning on family and finding ways to do that. And I think there's a spirit to there. But it goes beyond that, and it's community. And that's what I love about Utah too. Utah, we get lauded as having such a strong economy, low unemployment, but we don't get mentioned enough how we're such a philanthropic state, and how
we balance that so well. That's what's really great, about Utah in particular. It's an honor to go back to Utah. And when there's an issue that comes up, I'm like, hey, this is how Utah addresses it. This is what our local leaders are doing in the Utah level. This is what our tech centers are doing. This is what our universities are doing. Like, we're being really thoughtful. And I have so many anecdotes to go take back to Washington. Now, it's not leading into a bunch of legislation, but it's leading into really, really cool conversations, which when election integrity came up in the House administration, and we got to, and the Republicans got to bring for one hearing, they got to bring one expert. Who was it? It was Ricky Hatch. Weber County Clerk's Office. We run inclusive and secure elections in Utah. And we have people like Ricky Hatch that are working tirelessly to make sure that we're doing that. And that's really, really important. And it's a great thing for me to be able to go back and say, hey, look what we're doing, right? Utah's got a lot of these answers, and I'm going to keep pushing that message. So that's the last piece of Julie Snowball's question. Just keep doing amazing stuff at the Utah and local level, and I'll just keep trying to communicate it as best I can.
I love that. That's federalism. Congressman Moore, or Representative Moore, you said you preferred. So thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today. We're excited to have you back, and hopefully we can have you back in person soon. But really appreciate all you do, and please, stay in touch. We'd love to have you back soon.
Like I said, I signed up for this, so I'm just glad anybody's willing to come. And of course, Representative Lesser doing her real work over there. Thank you so much. It's good to see you again.
Yes.
Thank you all. I appreciate your willingness to chime in.
Hey, thank you so much. We'll see you soon.
Take care.